You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmeteas.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmeteas.com. Go on there and get a Hug Me Tea, and you're going to get a lot of hugs. I actually had a friend that wore one into the bank, and he left with 30 hugs. So if you want to get some attention, single guys or single ladies out there, go on hugmeteas.com and get a t-shirt. And part of the proceeds go to help out some worthy causes as well. Guys, we are now on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/outoftheboxpodcast. And as always, Stitcher and iTunes. If you like our show, go on iTunes and click on the subscribe button. It really helps us out a lot. And as always, we appreciate positive comments on the iTunes site. I am here today with Hannah Braime. She is the creator of a website called becomingwhoyouare.net, a life coach and an author. Hannah, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Rosie. And I'm really looking forward to chatting to you today.
I'm so excited to have you on here because you are teaching and preaching a lot of stuff that I talk about, which is being authentic to who you are and working on yourself, which is huge. And I don't think people realize how important it is to do personal development work. Do you meet people that are just lost along the way and are coming, when people find you as a life coach, are they on their path? Are they totally lost? Like, what is your experience with this?
So usually when people find me, where they are is they have a sense that something is not right. So they know that perhaps they've had a little bit of an epiphany around the fact that, they're in their 30s or so, and they are realizing that they're maybe not quite living the life they thought they would be living by that point.
Okay.
Or that, they've spent quite a number of years doing something that they've realized that actually they don't enjoy, that doesn't really light them up, or that they're in relationships that aren't really having them, or that they're just not very self-expressed is a really big one. They don't really feel like they know who they are anymore, because we do get a lot of kind of conditioning and social expectations, and that starts from a really, really young age. It starts with our family, and we all grow up, no matter sort of how, good our families are or how well-meaning they are, we all grow up with a set of expectations around who we think we should be and what we think is acceptable to do, who we think is acceptable to be, and so on and so forth. And, that gets enhanced by school, university, and then, most of us enter the workplace, and it continues. And so a lot of people come to me when they have this idea that, yeah, something is not right. I feel like there's something missing, or I've realized that I don't want to be doing what I'm doing right now. I don't want to necessarily be the person I am right now either. And I have maybe, people maybe have quite a difficult relationship with themselves more than anything, but they're not sure what the alternative looks like yet. So that's where I kind of meet people and support them in figuring out what that looks like for them and figuring out what their next steps are as well.
It sounds like you're talking about masks. A lot of people maybe are born one way, and then they start putting on masks to please others, to please their parents, to fit into society. And this is something that everyone deals with, unless you grew up, on a Zen Buddhist, with the Zen Buddhist monk father or something. Most people are putting these masks on to people please and other things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's for a really good reason as well. If you think about when we're babies, we need our parents to survive. Even the Zen Buddhist babies need their Zen Buddhist parents to survive, right? And so we know on a very, very unconscious level that, we're very, very sensitive as babies to feedback that we get from the people around us, whether that's our parents, extended family, babysitters, whatever. And so if we sense displeasure coming from them, we are going to change our behavior according to the signals that we get from them. And this can be signals that are as subtle as body language, not even overt, words or tone of voice or anything like that. And so unconsciously, we take all these little messages and these signals. And as you said, we start using those messages and those signals to create our own sort of set of masks. And like I was saying earlier, quite often we reach adulthood. I know I certainly did. And it was kind of a shock for me to realize, like, oh, this isn't actually me. Like, I'm not really sure this is who I want to become. And, that's partly why my website is called Becoming Who You Are, because it's about, taking off those masks, or at least being more aware of those masks and figuring out, okay, what is the person underneath? What does that person look like? Who are they? What are they really passionate about? What do they want to do in the world? And all those really important questions that I think sometimes we arrive at a little bit too late. But as I say, better too late than never.
Yes, that's so true. But it seems like the more you're willing to question, in my experience, the more actually open-minded you are, the more you say, I don't know who I am. The people that I've met who are very adamant that they quote unquote know who they are tend to be very close-minded and stubborn, which is kind of ironic because they're saying, I know who they are. But it seems like what they're really are doing, in my experience, those people who are very adamant, I know who I am, is that they're clinging to one of those masks, actually, and they've identified with it and they think that's who they are.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because, part of embracing who we are is embracing the fact that we do change. There's that whole debate around, can people really change? Can they not change? It's part of human nature to evolve, right? We wouldn't be who we are today as a human race if evolution wasn't part of our nature. And we all go through our own mini evolution throughout our lives. I know I'm certainly a very different person than I was 5 years ago, but part of that is because I'm passionate about learning and growth and, sort of living according to my values and making sure that I'm really conscious about doing all of those things. But a huge part of becoming who we are is about, it's kind of very meta, but it's about embracing the fact that, who we are will change.
Yeah, and so you should kind of
go
be
with the flow.
clueless. Well, I mean, there's a phrase, there's a quote that says, if you're not completely embarrassed by what you did last year, then you're not growing enough.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was actually talking to someone about this earlier because I have a client at the moment she's actually starting her own blog. And one of her fears that's coming up is, what if I write something now and then I change my mind later on? And we were talking about how, well, that's a healthy sign. That's a sign that, if you meet someone and as you said, if they're kind of doggedly sticking to this idea of, no, this is who I am, and they're doing that in the face of, all this evidence and reasons why maybe they're wrong, that's not healthy. Whereas if we can take information that we're all getting on a daily basis, if we can use experiences that we have to grow and to change who we are, then that's actually a really healthy process, and it's an integral part of our human nature as well.
It is. And I think that we're constantly growing and changing and learning. And so to say that you are just one way, like I said, I have met people like that. My father's like that. He's very adamant that he's this one way. And so he's always right that he is that one way. But in essence, he's not really growing or learning, unfortunately, as much as he could be. And, he says, well, it's because I'm old. But that's not true. I've met older people. And this is kind of a silly metaphor, but I see it a lot with technology. There's older people that I've met who said, well, I'm just not technologically, because I'm old, or I'm not technologically, or you should be better than I am because this wasn't around when I was younger. Well, guess what? This wasn't around when I was younger either. It's new. That's why it's called technology. And then yet I'll meet older people. I know people in their 70s and 80s who text and know how to use technology and know how to, because they're open-minded about it and they're willing to learn. And so I think sometimes age and other things can be an excuse when you're saying, well, I'm just stuck in my ways. I'm stubborn. This is how I am now. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
No, and the funny thing about that, I don't think that's a silly example at all. It's actually a great example because we all do that with different things. I was talking to someone the other day about business because I'm organizing, or I've just finished organizing this conference that I'm hosting in March, which is about the kind of psychological and emotional tools that will support us in developing a successful business. So we'll support us in entrepreneurship. And I was interviewing a coach called Steve Chandler for this conference. And I was saying, one of the beliefs that I had when I started out was, I'm just not a natural salesperson. And what he said is that, all of these things that we when we say I'm just not a natural this, or I'm too old, like those things are all self-fulfilling prophecies. And also what we're usually describing as skills. They're not actual character traits. Like people who say, oh, I'm just not good with money. It's like, well,
you can learn.
Yeah, if you've never learned it, then of course you're not good with money. I wasn't particularly good at money, when I was like 2 and I didn't really have a concept of what money was, right? So it's we tend to do that a lot. I know I certainly do it. Is I write things off as character traits that are actually skills, and when we do that, it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy because we never actually give ourselves the chance to learn these skills and to learn, whatever it is we want to be, whatever it is we want to do, whoever it is we want to be, whether it's becoming better with money or becoming better at sales, or whatever the things are that kind of float your personal boat.
Well, you made a really good point, but I want to elaborate on it because some things that actually people would even think are character traits are not. I had a life coach, an amazing life coach and teacher who talked about shyness
Mm,
there was a girl that was in my coaching group and she said, well, I'm just shy. I'm a really shy person. And you would think that that's a character trait, but he said, no, you're not. And she said, well, why do you say that? And he said, well, are you shy all the time? And she's like, no, I'm not shy with my friends and family because I know them. And he's like, well, then you're choosing to be shy as a defense mechanism, and you can choose not to be shy if you don't want to. And she had
hmm
never really thought of it that way. And after working with her for quite a bit, she got over her shyness. And it's true because I think shyness people think is a character trait, but it's actually a defense mechanism that we learn as children when we're in an uncomfortable situation to play that shy
Yeah.
character. And so a lot of things that you're talking about, skills that are learned that are even considered character traits, can also be learned.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we say that, so for example, with that woman that you were talking about, I can imagine. Obviously, I don't know for sure because this is from a distance, but when I think about times in my life when I've said that, the subtext of me saying, "Oh, well, that's just the way I am," has been, and it would be really uncomfortable for me to not be this way.
Yeah.
So
So you're protecting yourself.
yeah, and that's where the huge resistance comes up because, like I said, we get all these messages. We develop this perspective of how the world should be and also how we should relate to the world and the way that we should show up in the world. And we develop all these defenses based on that. And the truth is that nothing bad is really going to happen to us if we don't do that. It's just going to feel really uncomfortable. But,
That's
just
so
like,
true.
yeah, yeah. But it's actually kind of liberating when you realize that because I don't know about you, but I took a step back and I was like, oh, well, I guess that's not so bad.
It isn't. And I want to ask you about that because you said nothing really bad is going to happen. And in general, that's true. What about people who are growing up and they want to be authentic and they want to, be who they really are, but they're in a society or for whatever reason, they're stuck in a cultural framework that's not conducive to that. For example, say you're growing up in a very small town and everyone is very close-minded and very judgmental, and yet you're wanting to be expressive of yourself. Other than, just totally moving away from where you live, are there any alternatives to expressing yourself and feeling safe, I guess, if you're in maybe a provincial area or you're in maybe a country that's very repressive or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is a great question. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is finding other people because there will be other people. Like whatever you're going through, whatever place you are in right now, it's really, really easy, especially if everybody around you seems to be very different. And I'm emphasizing the word seems for a very good reason there. We all have this desire to fit in. I guarantee there will be other people who also want to be more self-expressed or,
Or
whatever,
feel the same way,
play.
but maybe they're hiding it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it can be really, really uncomfortable. But, the first person who can be that trailblazer and say, well, actually, this is me and this is what's really important to me in life. And these are the things that are really important to me to express. Often, what you can do is you can be that person. And I'm not minimizing how difficult that is. But if you can be that person, you're actually opening the gateway for other people to follow suit and to join you on that journey or that path as well.
That's true. And I think it's important what you said that a lot of the consequences are just in our mind to being, I know I've had experiences where I was being authentic in a family environment that was not conducive to that. And really, I just felt uncomfortable and that's it. Like nothing happened. I'm like, oh, I'm a grown up. I'm not going to get punished or nothing bad's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think, the worst thing for us sometimes is receiving negative feedback from other people or potentially annoying other people or, like displeasing other people, especially when it comes to things like family. We all, because we're all still playing to that old pattern of feeling like we kind of need our parents to survive, right? And again, like everybody has that. It's there for a very good evolutionary reason because otherwise some of us probably wouldn't have gotten to the age we've gotten to, right? Wouldn't have gotten beyond childhood. And so that's a really, really natural thing to experience. But, I think it's really, really important. Like a coach that I had once put it in a really great way, which was that you want to focus on or prioritize connection over validation. So if you go into interactions wanting validation, the tricky thing with that is that we all end up, if we want to be liked, if that's the most important thing to us, we all end up changing little aspects of ourselves, kind of shaving off corners and, being a little bit different here, being a little bit different there to get that validation. But the problem is that even if we get that validation at the end of the day, we know deep down that the person that that the other person is validating is not who we actually are, it's who we're pretending to be. So it doesn't really meet that need to begin with.
Like
Whereas if we
we're giving up part of ourselves to get validation, and so therefore the validation isn't really validation.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas if we can go in focusing on connection, then we can really show up as ourselves. And yeah, not everybody is going to like that. And that is hard when it happens. You know, I'm definitely, I'm the first person to say that, right? I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I hate annoying people. Like it still leaves me feeling really uncomfortable to know that I have displeased someone or annoyed someone. But at the end of the day, you know, I think part of kind of growing up and individuating is also recognizing that we have zero control or responsibility for other people's feelings.
But
Like
let's
we
talk
cannot
about
control it.
I'm sorry, let's talk about the people
Yeah.
pleasing that you just talked about because it's very, very important to understand because a lot of women tend to be people pleasers. We're taught, you know, to please our parents, to be a good girl, you know, to be polite and dainty and all these things that we're socially conditioned to do. But people pleasing actually doesn't work because you're pleasing what you think other people want and they're putting out also unless they're being truly authentic, which if someone was truly authentic, they wouldn't want you to bend over backwards for them. They're putting out what they think you want to be pleased. So it's like you're both doing kind of this weird false pleasing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because I think there are some people who might sound a bit harsh, but love being around people pleasers because they do want people to sort of, you know, do things for them or, you know, go out of their way, you know, people who have boundaries issues basically. And, you know, I think around people like that, you just want to kind of take a step back from that as quickly as possible. But yeah, in a situation where everyone is just people pleasing, then you're all just kind of dancing around each other wearing those masks that you were talking about.
Yeah. So you're not actually pleasing the person. You're pleasing their mask, which is
Yeah, right, exactly.
and because obviously someone who needs others to please them isn't happy inside and so then it's like this unhealthy cycle, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
So you have this awesome free ebook online. People can go on your website becomingwhoyouare.net and download how to overcome the 5 most common blocks to authenticity. What are some of those blocks that people usually come up with when they're trying to be who they are, which sounds like something that would be really easy, but it's, you know, so many people are not who they are.
Yeah, so one of those blocks was something that I talked about earlier, which is surrounding yourself with the right people, like creating the right kind of community. Because, you know, there's that saying that everybody knows from Jim Rohn that you are the sum total of the 5 people that you're closest to. And it's so true. You
So
know,
for those of you
it's
who
so
don't know, Jim Rohn is a personal development author, and he says that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a bit of an assumption on my part that everyone's going to know that. I think when you spend so much time in the personal development world, you just live in this bubble.
No, I knew who he was, but I just wanted to clarify for the listeners who don't.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, so he is a brilliant, brilliant author. I think he's passed away now, correct?
Yes, he has, I
Yes,
think.
but
Yeah.
he, you know, all through the 20th century wrote many, many books about personal development and working on yourself and transformational information in psychology. And he says that the 5 people that you surround yourself you are the average of those people. So people, if you're listening and you don't have people around you that are not that awesome, you want to kind of raise your average, right? By hanging out with better people.
Yes, the way I love to think about this, and I'm trying to remember if I phrased it exactly this way in the book, but this is the way, because I wrote the book a while ago now, but this is the way I think about it now, is that, you know, ideally what I try and do is surround myself with people who are sort of a couple of steps ahead of me.
Yes, yes.
So
I
they're
always do
sort of
that.
on the same path. They're not like super far ahead of me so that they're going to be like, who are you?
You're ruining my averages.
Yeah, yeah. But you can kind of, they're at a stage where, you know, you can complement each other.
Yes, but you want someone that is challenging you to grow and learn. And I think what a lot of people do is they, you know, maybe, and not to say that you're friends from high school or there's anything wrong with them, but a lot of people have the same friends from high school or grade school that they've had forever. And they just feel kind of comfortable. Like this person accepts me for who I am or who I've pretended to be. And that's fine. And you want to expand your group of friends and make sure that you have people that are teaching you something. You know, I always try to have friends that, like you said, know a little bit more than me in certain fields. And not that they would talk down to me, because that would actually be steps behind you if someone's talking down to you. But you want someone who's going to challenge you to grow and learn. And you know what I really love, Hannah, is people that call you out on your bullshit, because sometimes we do bullshit.
Yes.
We have our mask. And if you can have a friend that says, you know what, I smell bullshit here, then that's awesome.
That is so true. And, this, I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions around this idea of surrounding yourself with supportive people. Because I hear from a lot of people who email me in particular, who find my site and they're like, oh my gosh, no one around me agrees with what I'm doing. And I think I understand what they mean. Like, I think usually what they're getting at when they say that is that people around them are not, that, they're not like sort of as enthusiastic as they are about the things that they want to do. They're not as passionate about them. And, it is important to have people that share your enthusiasm and share your passion, but you do not want to surround yourself with people who are just like, yeah, that's great all the time, because you need to keep some kind of perspective. Like we all kind of know or know of those people who get surrounded by yes people and
They're
never have anyone
positive, but
challenging
they're
them.
positive, but it's like a fake positivity. They're just supporting you to support you. For example, so let me give an example to what you're saying. So say you're dating a very unhealthy person, and the person's like, oh yeah, I like him, he's nice, and they're just kind of
Hmm.
supporting you because they don't want to say, you know what, I don't like this guy, he's an asshole, and they don't want to challenge you in that area.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe, and I had this experience where I was dating a guy who was very abusive, and I was kind of looking for someone to tell me. I kind of knew deep down that I wanted to get rid of him, but I wasn't ready to,
Mm.
and I was kind of looking for someone that had my back, that was like, yeah, you need to get rid of this guy, he's a jerk. And so sometimes saying something that isn't the most positive, but it's real and authentic, actually moves that person forward even more.
Absolutely. And that's where the whole connection over validation piece comes in. It's because, if a friend were to have said that to you at that time, they would have had to, it would have been really uncomfortable for them, no doubt. But they would have done it because they had your best interests at heart. And that's where connection comes in, rather than the validation of saying, yeah, he's nice, he's nice. So yeah, we don't want to be surrounded by yes people all the time, because also, if we are making a big change in our lives, for example, sometimes it's actually really helpful to have people question us and to have to go through that process ourselves of exploring all those different questions that they have, exploring all the doubts that they have, and reaffirming for ourselves either, yes, this is really what I want to be doing, and I've responded to all these questions, I've listen to all this constructive criticism, I've gone through this, and I'm still really sure of what I want to be doing. Or to think, actually, okay, maybe there are some little things that I can change. So
Now,
even people who are slightly doubtful of us, like that can be really helpful. We all need those people.
it is very helpful, but I want to make the distinction also because you said that the person has our best interest. The intention is the most important place that you need to examine in friends, because there's a difference
Hmm.
between someone who's questioning you because they genuinely care about you, saying, hey, I'm not sure about this guy, he seems like you seem like you test your boundaries around him, and someone who's just a hater. Maybe you're in love and
Mm.
the person is doesn't is single and lonely, and they are just self-sabotaging. So it's important to see where the intention is coming from, because I definitely have a girlfriend who's awesome, and she does question me and challenge me, but I always know it's coming from a good place, versus some other colleagues that I know, not friends because I keep them at an arm's length, who are haters, and their questioning is coming from a place of negativity, self-doubt, self-sabotage, etc., etc.
Yeah, I don't know if you have this saying in the US, but we have I guess, a social phenomenon here that we call tall poppy syndrome, which is this
I
idea
haven't. What
that,
is that?
okay, so I'll try and explain it as eloquently as possible. It's one of those sayings that I know what it means, but it's a little bit hard to verbalize it. But like in a field where it's like the tallest poppy is the first one to be cut down in a field.
Oh, it's kind of like the
So
crabs. Have you heard the crab
yeah,
one?
yeah, exactly. The crabs in the bucket, and they'll pull the other crabs back in.
Yeah.
But it's basically envy. Like, people who are envious um, do not, take offense sometimes, or do not like people who are genuinely skilled, genuinely good at something. And they will criticize them or put them down or gossip about them, or we've probably all had this, write horrible things about them online, and that is basically tall poppy syndrome. Is that some people, and I think a lot of times they're not even super aware of it. Like, they have a real issue with seeing someone who is genuinely skilled and good at what they do, and that it's not them. There's some envy there.
It is. And the only way you can really tell, unfortunately, is to get more in touch with yourself and your authenticity, and then feel out your
Hmm.
natural compass and say, does this feel like a self-sabotage? Does this feel like, someone being very hateful, or does it feel like someone who genuinely has my back? And you will feel the difference. You definitely will. But if someone is challenging you and you're very uncomfortable, it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So you have to look at the person's past history and see, hey, has this person always had my best intention?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And to be clear, blood and relatives and other things, they don't necessarily count. And so you really need to make sure what you feel and what you trust your gut is, because sometimes, sisters, brothers can be very jealous. Parents, even though it's your mom or dad, and you would think, well, why would my mom or dad do this? You just never know what someone's intention is. And like you said, which was very important, Hannah, it's subconscious sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is a slightly controversial thing to say, but I think sometimes when it comes to sort of us living as the most authentic version of ourselves, our family are not going to be the most supportive people of that. Some people will absolutely have family who are supportive, but if you think, every family has its dynamics, right? And we are the way we are. We've developed the mask that we develop for a certain reason. And that reason is usually to try and fit in with the people around us. And so that's not to say that, your family are going to turn to haters or whatever. Unfortunately, some people's families do. But just to say that when it comes to creating that community, usually for most people, that community is outside of their immediate family.
Yes. And it's okay. It's okay to also, I want to talk about this because sometimes your family is not going to 100% agree with everything you do. And it's important to have that support group. It's important to have those external friends. It's important not to share everything. You don't have to share everything with everyone, especially if you go to a certain, say you go to your mom, just as an example, and she's very supportive of you doing only what she wants. And so say you want to be an artist or a writer or something that's outside of the family norm. And every single time you get an accomplishment or accolade in that area, you bring it to your mom's attention. She's just not happy and you keep getting rejected. Well, don't go to that area. Even though it's your mother, you have to find those boundaries where you're going to people who are helping you grow and learn and not holding you back in that area.
Absolutely. That's a really great exercise, actually. And I'm trying to remember where I heard this from, and I can't off the top of my head. But with this exercise, the idea is that you take a big dream you're working on. This might be creating your own business. It might be becoming a stand-up comedian. It might be running your own podcast. Like, the dream could be anything, right? And you draw 2 circles on a page. And in the first circle, you put people that you can talk to about that dream, right? People you can express your fears to, your doubts to, your successes, your wins, your potential, your opportunities, the whole shebang, basically. And then in the second circle, you put people who are in your life right now, like people who are very close to you in your life, who you can talk to about most things, but who, if this topic comes up about this particular dream that you have, it's, like you said, Rosie, based on history, it's probably a good idea to start changing the subject at that point.
Yeah, and it's really not that you can't not talk to the person. You just can't talk to the person about that. And that's okay. Yeah, you want to develop the best you can and be healthy and happy and whole and challenged and grow. And if those people are going to hold you back, even if they're your mother or your father or your sister or someone so close to you and you love them and you usually tell them everything, if they're going to be a hater about it, you can't talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's dealing with their own. I think especially as people kind of get older, and I don't know about you, Rosie, but I had this moment when I was kind of in my early 20s when I saw people who are like the same age as me becoming like, Hollywood actresses and stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like it really started questioning like how much have I achieved in my life. but we're all kind of on our own path. And I think sometimes it can be really difficult for people to see, especially people who are super close to them, people that they went to school with, or, really old friends, people that they've known forever, do what they perceive as maybe pulling ahead or maybe taking a different path, because, and also this is the thing, was when we change paths, I think sometimes people see that as sort of implicit criticism of the path that they're on. If you make a radically different lifestyle choice to someone, especially if they're a family member or a close friend, I've heard about this a lot from people who decide to unschool their kids, which is like homeschooling, but without a curriculum, focusing on what their kids are passionate about. And they've run into real problems with their friends who have taken their choice to unschool as an implicit criticism of their choice to school, right? Well, to conventionally school.
Well, let's just look at the current controversy right now. There's a big controversy with vaccines. There are people who are saying, hey, I don't agree with the science or haven't seen all the science yet, and they're just being chastised and crucified on these internet forums and all over the place and bullied. How dare you, blah 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 blah. And it's just, look, I don't know whether or not vaccines are safe or not safe, and I've been vaccinated and I don't have any children yet, so I don't know what I would do in that situation. But it's the level of attack and chastising and anger And like you said, you're not choosing to do what I choose to do, and how dare you? And I've seen a
Mm.
lot of that, and it's pretty cruel and very, very, I would consider a lot of cyberbullying.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, personally, I'm quite strongly pro-vaccination, and I feel terrible like seeing that kind of thing as well. I just think it's such a bad way to approach, blaming and shame does not do anyone any favors. It doesn't make you feel good as the person doing the shaming. It certainly doesn't make the people being shamed feel good. It does not lead to a productive solution. But at the end of the day, I think when a debate gets that vociferous as well, it's not actually about the topic that it's supposedly about. I
Hmm.
think this is just my personal opinion again, but I think it often becomes a vehicle for people to act out other frustrations and other resentments. And going back to this whole question of authenticity and self-knowledge, this is where self-knowledge is so important, because you need to be able to say to yourself, actually, maybe I'm not super angry about some random person on the internet. Maybe like their decision to vaccinate their child is not what I'm angry about right now.
A
Or
lot of
not
times there's
vaccinate
deeper
their child, as the
issues.
choice may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I want to talk about self-love because that is so
Mm-hmm.
important. That is like the number one thing that's gonna help you through this journey of authenticity, because no one else, you know, when all is said and done, really it's your journey, right? So how important
Yeah.
is taking care of yourself, the self-love, and really focusing. I guess there's a lot of confusion in our society about selfishness and
Mm.
self-love. And I don't know if you can bring a little bit of light to that.
Yeah. So, in answer to your first question, which is how important is it, I would say it's necessary. I wouldn't, it's not even really necessarily a question of it being important, whether it's important or not. I would say it's actually necessary. If you think about relationships that we have, either with our spouse or our partner or, family members or friends, all those relationships are things that hopefully we invest in, right? And if they're good, I'll issue the caveat. I'm talking about good relationships here, right? Relationships that we invest in where there's reciprocity, where we really take the time to get to know that person. And for a lot of us, we do that with everyone apart from ourselves, right? Going back to what we were talking about earlier, we assume that we just are the way we are, and that's it. And for me, the way I define self care is maybe a little bit different to the way that some other people talk about it. But for me, it's about getting to know yourself. And as a subset of that, being able to meet your own needs. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with nonviolent communication.
I am.
Okay, cool. So, you know
But
that,
our listeners might not be. So,
oh, yes, did it again.
so guys, nonviolent communication is a style of communicating where you're helping to meet the other person's need. Is that how you would describe it? Instead of you're making them feel truly heard. And sometimes people communicate in a way where they can make the person feel heard, and that can diffuse any sort of anger or aggression. That's a good definition?
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. It's a way of communicating and relating to other people where you focus on people's feelings and people's needs, and you accept and respect the fact that everybody has shared needs. We all have different ways of going about trying to meet them, but we all have shared human needs. And if anyone is really interested in this, there's actually a great couple of resources on the Center for Nonviolent Communication website. There's two PDFs in particular that I use all the time for myself and with my clients as well. One is a list of feelings, which might sound really basic, but trust me, it's like it really helps expand your vocabulary. Rather than saying, I feel fine or I feel good. There's like a whole list of, or,
Very
I feel
specific,
bad.
right?
I
Yeah.
don't feel so great today. There's this whole list of very, very specific feelings, both when your needs are met and when your needs are not met, which is super, super helpful for really, expanding your vocabulary for communicating with other people, but also for yourself as well. Just being really able to pinpoint for yourself, actually, it's not anger that I feel, it's resentment, or it's not sadness I feel, it's nostalgia, something like that.
And it can help you get to underneath what's really, because a lot of people believe that the issue at hand is the issue at hand. For example, like you said, they think they're so angry because of the vaccinations, but really they're angry because maybe they don't feel heard about other things in their life, and because someone is dissenting to their desire for vaccination, that's triggering their deep-rooted feeling of not being heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for example, if just going back to the whole vaccination thing, like if someone was very neglected as a child, and they have the belief that not vaccinating your child is a form of neglect, of course they're going to be angry with those people,
Yeah,
right?
so
But it's
they're
not
deep rooted.
actually
They're very
about,
deep rooted.
yeah, but it's not actually about the other, like every emotion that we experience, we're experiencing it in relation to something that is about us, right? And
Yes.
about our beliefs and about our experiences. So yeah, being able to pinpoint those feelings can, as you said, really help you get back to the deep rooted, the source of that feeling, the real source, not the
Fake
source that
source.
appears to be yeah, the superficial or
The trigger.
apparent source. Yeah, right. And then the other resource which I would love to point your listeners to is the list of needs. Again, super helpful for developing your vocabulary, because when you can work out how you're feeling, then the question is, okay, what is the need that is being met or not met here? And usually, for slightly uncomfortable or challenging feelings, it's an unmet need. But self-care for me, and the way that I teach it, is it's about being able to get in touch with your feelings, being able to identify what the unmet need is underneath it, and then being able to take steps to meet that need in a way that is sustainable and healthy.
That sounds great, and I just want everyone to know who's listening that isn't familiar with nonviolent communication that this style of communicating is used in peace talks. It's used when there's two groups of radically. It's been used with two groups of radically different people who are at war or who, So if you think, well, this is silly, this isn't going to help me in my relationship, pointing to what I feel and this and that. I mean, this style of communication is used when there's groups of people that hate each other and have had histories of hate towards each other, for example, with the Middle East and other groups. So it's very, very effective.
And I think actually Marshall Rosenberg died earlier this week or last week, didn't he? Very,
I'm
very
not
recently.
sure. Yeah.
But if you go to their website, you can see evidence of like where they've used this and where they've used it to success as well. So it's not just kind of some new agey hippy dippy thing. It really does work. And I
I
know,
like that. I like that you say that because everything that I try to bring light to on the podcast is I want to have people understand that a lot of this stuff has a lot of practical implications and practical uses, and also that a lot of this information is backed by science and psychology. Because I feel that a lot of the new age stuff, and there's been a lot of people who are more practical who consider it woo or frou frou or up in the air. And I like that you said that on your website that you have a very practical application for a lot of these techniques.
yeah, absolutely. I'm not such a huge fan of the woo side of personal development myself. I'm a little bit of a skeptic. Although having said that, there are definitely elements of truth in things like the law of attraction. I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but for example, studies have shown that people who believe they are luckier are objectively luckier, because they're just more primed to finding opportunities in their day-to-day lives to be lucky. And so that there are kind of elements of truth within all of those things. But yeah, I think for me anyway, the really important thing is to work out, okay, how can I actually apply this in my life right now?
Yes.
And in a way that empowers me as well, not that kind of gives my power away to some sort of unknown universal force or whatever.
I do. And I think taking action is the number one key because a lot of people read some of these self-help books and personal development books and transformational things. And they think, oh, well, if I just think positive, everything will be fine. It's the actions plus the positive thinking plus, having a goal, setting towards it and actually putting the practical application. So I really like that. So I have a very limited amount of time, unfortunately. So I just want to get into some more of the blocks. Obviously, we won't have time to go through all of them, but the first one you talked about was surrounding yourself with people in your life that are going to support you and having, that positive support group. What are some of the other blocks to becoming who you really are?
So the second block is this idea that we were talking about of connection over validation and overcoming the fear of like, what are people going to think of me if I show up as myself? What are they going to judge me? Are they going to dislike me? And really about this idea of we can care about other people and we can show up for the important people in our lives, and we can also make decisions that are right for us. It's not a mutually exclusive thing. I think sometimes people who like me, who were people pleasers, can view it as an all or nothing scenario where, people will say, oh, well, I don't want to just be like really mean to people all the time. And I mean, of course you don't, right? No one, no one wants that. And it's not about that. It's about, being able to hold both scenarios where you can absolutely care about other people and you can also give them a loving no. You can care about other people and you can respect them and you can also, respectfully disagree with them and make your own decisions in life. So that's another chapter and another block, a really common block is this idea of like, what will people think of me and overcoming that fear of judgment.
I think judgment is really important, and it's really important because we're conditioned from such a young age to care what other people think. The way the school system is set up, like you said, wanting to please your teacher and other things like that. Do you want to give the quote again for the book, from the book?
Oh, yeah. Let me just find it. So this is a quote from a woman called Danielle Laporte, who is a fairly well-known, online anyway, writer and personal development blogger. She's written a couple of books. She does speaking events and so on. But the quote goes, "The need to be normal is the predominant anxiety disorder in modern life."
That's great.
Which I love. Yeah, I think it's a great quote.
It's a great quote. And I just want to talk about judgment because I know a lot of people who say they don't care. Oh, I don't care what other people think. I really don't, give a rat's ass or whatever, what others think. Yet the way that they're carrying their body and the way that they're so desperate to not care actually shows that they care very much what others' opinions are of them. And so I think it's important for us to really get in touch with, like you said, what's really underneath all of that. If you're saying you don't care what other people think, yet, you have 20,000 piercings on your face and you're 20,000 tattoos and you're purposely trying to make a statement, it kind of says the contrary, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of the slightly ironic thing about that approach. Whereas I think, if we were all going to be really self-aware about this and really honest, then yeah, of course we all care about what people think. And it's, the aim of becoming more authentic is not just stop caring about what other people think, because like putting it quite bluntly, that's called becoming a sociopath. So we definitely don't want to go that way.
But acknowledging that you care is the first step. Acknowledging that everyone cares, saying, "Hey, I do care what other people think, but I'm going to, love myself enough to not put that other person's opinion before my own needs." I think that's what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. And, acknowledging that we can care about people and we don't have to take their advice, and this is the problem. And I think this is where people get a little bit confused. And I know I certainly did, is that, when other people give us advice, it's great, but ultimately they're not the ones that have to live with that advice. We have to live with the consequences of the decisions we make. So, we can care about someone and we can also acknowledge that their advice, their path in life is not necessarily going to be the right path for us. And that's where this distinction really comes in, and where we can, we can still care about people. We can still be a kind, loving person, a kind, loving daughter, son, sister, brother, aunt, whatever, whatever role you happen to have with that person. And we can also go our own way and make our own choices. And yeah, not everybody's going to like that. But, that goes, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but back to the whole connection over validation thing. It's like, well, would you rather show up as yourself or would you rather have them like you?
I think that's a great point. Now, I want to ask you, what your coaching experience is with people that you're forced to be around that don't want to examine themselves at all and are constantly projecting. So maybe family members or friends or coworkers, who maybe a coworker is a good example because you're forced to see them on a daily basis. I know people that tend to be very unhappy with themselves, and yet they're constantly giving advice to others. First of all, maybe you can explain to the listeners what that's about. For example, someone who's always dieting and, maybe you don't have an issue with weight or whatever, yet they're always giving you weight loss advice. Or everyone knows that person who's always giving advice. Or maybe the person, this is a common one, someone who's had 4 or 5 failed marriages, and yet they say, oh, this is what you need to do to have a happy marriage. I know because I've, had all these failed marriages. Yet, so they're giving advice on relationship, yet they haven't had a healthy relationship. I hear that a lot from people because, I'm a newlywed and I get a lot of advice from people. Oh, this is what you need to do to keep your man happy. Yet they've been divorced 4 times.
Right. Which is not, no offense to them, I'm sure they mean well, but it's not a great advertisement for their advice, right? Yeah. So I think that's a really, really important point. And the way that I approach this is to go back to that old saying of looking at at what people do, not what they say.
Yeah.
So yes, if someone has been divorced 4 times, then they have a lot of marital experience, but it's not necessarily the kind of experience that you want.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this goes back to that question of surrounding yourself with people who are a couple of steps ahead of you. It's funny that you brought up the dieting example because I actually used to work with someone for a couple of months a few years ago, just at a temp job. And this woman was obese and she would give like other people sitting around her advice on what they shouldn't be eating if they wanted to keep their weight down. And it was really awkward because, it's one of those taboos where you can't turn around and say, no offense, but why should I take advice from you?
Yeah. They can project onto you. Yeah. That's actually the reason I'm asking, because I know someone like this, but this person is constantly projecting on me. I have to see them for business reasons. And it's like they're imposing themselves on you, yet if you impose back, you're considered the rude one. Like you said, there's a taboo with it. So that's kind of a tricky situation, but yeah, I know a lot of women like that, and it's not just a female thing. It just is a coincidence that they're women. But like you said, that are overweight yet always telling me, "Oh, you should not eat that. You should not do that. You should not do that," and it's very awkward.
It is. And I mean, there's a number of different ways that you can handle it. And I can suggest a few if that would be helpful. And obviously, for anyone listening to this, I have my own ways of handling these kinds of situations, which fit in with sort of my preferences and the way that I like to deflect these kinds of situations. But everybody's different, right? So, one way you can be quite upfront with people, I think, and set a boundary, which is not about them and about their weight. Let's use the weight example or the dieting example, but it's very much like, I'm not looking for advice about my diet right now. Thanks, but no thanks, basically. And maybe there's a nicer way of saying it than that, but just being very, very clear with them. Like, I hear what you're saying, and I'm really happy with my diet right now. I'm not looking for advice. And setting that boundary, because then if someone continues to push that boundary, you can go back and say, well, I'm not looking for advice. And, if they continue, then
it's obvious that they're pushing a boundary and that they have, you're kind of putting the mirror up to them. You're saying, here's the line, and then here's the mirror.
Because like we were saying earlier, about the whole vaccination thing, it's not about the vaccinations. The chances are with this person, it's probably not about the diet advice, or it's not about the financial advice from someone who's broke, or it's not about, the marital advice.
They want to feel heard in some way.
Mm-hmm. Or they want to feel powerful, or like they have something to offer.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can, and it's, the thing is that depending on what kind of relationship you have with that person, it's not necessarily, the onus is not necessarily on you to like explore that with them, because you don't want to become their therapist, right? It's really important to have that boundary. So you can set a boundary with them and just be very clear. And I found that this works best in sort of situations that are more clear cut, like work, where it's maybe not super appropriate to have like really, really personal conversations with people. But just to say, like, here's my boundary here. Like, I'm just not looking, thanks. I'm not really looking for advice about this right now. Another way that you can approach it is to call people out on it and to say, wow, you seem really concerned with my diet. Like, why do you think that is?
I love that.
That's a little bit more of a sort of, I guess, hardcore approach, but you are actually getting really to the root of the matter then. You're kind of skipping the superficial, like, I'm the superficial concern or what it seems to be, and actually getting to the meta part of the conversation, which is that, this keeps coming up. Why do you keep bringing up my diet? So that's another way that you can approach it. Another way you can approach it, if you don't want to go down either of those routes, is just to disengage and to change the subject every time they bring it up. And hopefully, fingers crossed, if you do that with someone, they get the message after a while.
You mean you can't just say, "Hey, you should not be giving advice to me. Look in the mirror."
Well, the thing is that, of course, anyone can give advice if they want to. Like, what we can't control whether or not other people give advice to us. What we can control is
how we deal with it, right?
Yeah, how we receive it and whether we choose to take it or not. So, I'm not going to be taking financial advice from someone who is stone broke. I'm from someone who is in thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars of debt, right?
Well,
so
I
they can give me that advice all they want. But my responsibility is for myself, it's do I take that? And then do I really want to listen to this? And if the answer is no, then it's well, I can try and communicate that to them in as respectful a way as possible.
Yes, that is a good idea. And I want to bring up something that you just mentioned, because you mentioned financial advice. And earlier in the podcast, you mentioned not being good with finance. And we have to wrap up soon, but I know that you are recently married and that was a very important conversation. And I just want to talk about this a little bit because I have a lot of listeners of the podcast that are into finance and
Mhm.
personal development and finance. And so I want to talk about the importance of having that conversation and that connection with money because it is actually a huge point of argument among many couples.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I listened to the episode that you did with Jake, and as he mentioned, it was for us as well. So yeah, I mean, it's hugely uncomfortable because I think, the funny thing about money, and it's the same with things like food and timekeeping as well, is that how we relate to money says so much about how we relate to other areas of our life too. It's never just about money. Our attitude towards money, you were talking about projection earlier, and so much of our psychological stuff gets projected onto our relationship with things like money,
Money
things
is a
like
trigger.
food.
Yeah. Food,
Yeah,
anything
absolutely.
emotional, anything that makes you emotional, money, food, sex, things like that, there's triggers, right?
Yeah, and the things about money and food is it's not like it's not like, for example, having alcohol dependency or having a drug problem where it's like you can just stop, right? You have to eat and you have to spend money. Like,
Okay.
wait, unless you want to just completely dissociate yourself from society altogether, which, good luck with that. I think it's going to be really hard,
Yeah, yeah.
but you have to have those things in your life. So yeah, it was a really, really it was something that was definitely challenging for us. And I think what really helped for me is certainly because, God knows I've definitely got more than my fair share of hang-ups around money. And was looking at like what are those actual triggers? Like what is really going on? What is like the real issue here? What are the fears? What are the beliefs that I have around this and that we have around this? Where are these beliefs jarring? Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you probably know this, if you're sort of very into personal development, but there's that saying that especially when it comes to couples, like you end up with the person who is probably most going to trigger your stuff,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And
So
it's
that
almost like an unconscious way of healing yourself.
it is. So I want to explain that to the listeners who don't know what she's talking about. So we become attracted to people that I don't want to say trigger us, but it's like we're unconsciously attracted to all of our unresolved parent stuff. I guess
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
way of
That's a
saying it.
better way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why when you meet someone for the first time and you fall in love hard and you're like, oh my God, it seems like I know this person. I've known them forever. You do know them forever. You have known them forever. They are the unresolved issues of your childhood.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's why everything feels so familiar and wonderful. And then, so after that's what creates the attraction inside of you. And then, and that's what creates attraction. That's why people, you always hear the women who grew up with daddy issues, and then they're with the asshole growing up, and they're like, why do I only attract assholes? Because that's your unresolved shit, right?
Hmm. And it's not about the asshole, right?
It's not about them. It's all
It's
about you. It's all about
yeah.
you. That's why you
Yeah.
attracted them. And so you get to go in and clean up that stuff. And money is so important. That's why, a lot of people disregard personal finance or have belief that, if you're rich, if you have money, you're greedy, or if you're money, this and that. That's why I bring so many financial people to the podcast because finance is not just finance. Finance is like you said, a lot of unresolved baggage and issues and beliefs and stuff. And it's so
Hmm.
important. It's all tied in, and you wouldn't think it was tied in, but it's so totally tied in because it's such an essential part of society, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that the way you guys dealt with it, maybe you can share your story a little bit and some of the stuff that came up for you guys. That can help some of the listeners who are having issues, since I think 60 or 70% of relationship problems are financially related.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a big thing that came up for us, and and I'm sure Jake won't mind me talking about this, but Jake is very, very organized when it comes to finances and he tracks everything. I did not at all.
Okay.
I always sort of got by somehow. Looking back, I'm like, how? But, I was always sort of okay. But, for example, I had some student debt left hanging over and everything, and I was just so not conscious about I was not a big spender at all, and I'm not a big spender, in a way. And I think that's another thing when it comes to money. And I think Jake said this as well. It's like it's really important to make sure that you have aligned values when it comes to money. So neither of us are really big spenders, but he had way more transparency and consciousness around his spending and where his money was coming from and where it was going than I did. And I was very resistant to change. And again, this is where that what we were just talking about comes up, which is that it wasn't actually about the money. When we started having these conversations, I was like, oh, he's trying to change me. And it got
This
very
is who
defensive.
I am. I'm free and I can spend however
Exactly.
I want.
Exactly. And that was totally, there's so few things that I would ever say that about because, about most stuff, I'm like, oh, that's quite a good idea. Yeah, I'll start doing that. And so what really worked for us was, and vice versa for him as well. There was stuff about the way that I was showing up with regards to money in our relationship that was, triggering for him and that jarred with some of his stuff as well. And so what I think really, really helped us, and this sounds really simple, but honestly, it was like, I think it was the thing that was the most helpful. It was, we still have quite different approaches to finances, but I think being able to talk about it is the key thing, and being able to talk about it in a way where you're on each other's sides. So for
Yes,
me, that
yes.
really meant like getting clear on, okay, what am I projecting onto him? So, for example, is he really trying to change me? Or as you said, is he trying to help me?
Yes.
And rather than assigning that motive to him and then acting based on that assumption that I've made, like giving him the benefit of the doubt, taking a step back, looking at, the objective situation and what was being said and what was being done, and, looking at, and then taking it back to needs, as we talked about with nonviolent communication, looking at what are the unmet needs here. Because as I said, it's never about just the money, right? I had a whole ton of stuff that was attached, a
Baggage,
meaning that
our
I was
baggage,
attached.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And we all have it. And like we were saying, money, food, timekeeping is another big one that comes up for people. Like all of these things become vehicles essentially for our unresolved baggage.
And I
And so
think what,
getting,
oh,
oh,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think once you start doing this work on yourself, you realize that it's always something deeper. I remember I had a girlfriend who
Yes.
was very resistant to this type of work, and she would say, maybe it's not about something deeper. Maybe taking out the trash is just taking about the trash. And it's never about taking out the trash. It's always something deeper. It's always something deeper. And once you examine it, for 100% of people, and I'm stand by the statistic that I've seen that have done the work will agree and have said, yeah, there's always something underneath it. It's because who would get mad about taking out the trash? It's so silly. Who would get mad
Exactly.
about, wanting to, make a chart about the finances unless you were completely insane. And most of us are not completely insane. So obviously there's a deeper issue.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. It definitely applies to finances, but I think it applies to anything where we say to ourselves, well, I just shouldn't be getting so worked up about this. Why shouldn't you? There's usually a really, really good reason why you are. It's probably not to do with the immediate situation. It's probably because usually there's something about the immediate situation that is triggering, some kind of like past memory or experience or belief or feeling, whatever the case may be. But every feeling is there for a very, very good reason. Like there's no such thing as like,
An
people
accidental
talk about
button.
exactly. Yeah,
Buttons are there
yeah.
for a reason.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, I appreciate that in the moment it doesn't feel so great when you're being triggered by something mundane like taking out the trash. But the great thing is that it's all information about ourselves.
It is. And I think that it's okay to take time to. A lot of people think things have to be resolved right away. It's
Nope.
okay to take time and explore and go underneath and think about it and take some time to meditate or go to a quiet space and say, why does this bug me so much? You don't have to resolve the fight right away. That's something that in my early 20s I did. I wanted to resolve the fight right away. No, let's sit down and talk it out. And I would be pissed
Hmm.
and my boyfriend would be pissed and, nothing would get resolved because we were both angry. So it's okay to take a walk and say, you know what, let me just get some space from you and figure it out.
That actually ties back to another of the blocks to authenticity that I talk about in the ebook, which is this idea of letting go of the finish line. And in other words, letting go of this idea that, one day everything is going to be great and you're going to be fixed and everything's going to be resolved, because that's just not real life. There's always going to be unresolved stuff. There's always going to be uncertainty. There's always going to be, periods of self-doubt and all of
More
that stuff
baggage.
that yeah, exactly. So
um,
it is an ongoing journey.
So I'm so upset because honestly, I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 or 3 hours, but we have to wrap up. So we didn't finish going over all the blocks, which is great because that means the listeners, yes, you guys can go on becomingwhoyouare.net and download the free ebook, Overcoming the 5 Most Common Blocks to Authenticity, which is awesome that you're offering that, Hannah. Thank you so much. And what else can people find you? Where can people learn about your coaching other than your website? What else do you offer? Are you on Twitter? Like, tell everyone everything.
Yes, I am on Twitter. The vast majority of my stuff is on my website, which, as you said, is becomingwhoyouare.net. You can find me on Twitter. It's a little bit awkward. It's at become who, and then the letter U and the letter R, because becoming who you are was just a little bit too long. So it's at become who, letter U, letter R.
That's fine. I will have a link to your Twitter on the website.
Thank you
So if
so
you
much.
guys are like, wait, what? And you're scrambling to write this down, you can go on outoftheboxpodcast.com and I will have a link to her website and her Twitter and anything upcoming for you, any books, what are you working on, podcasting?
Yes. So I should say, because if you enjoy Out of the Box, if you like listening to a podcast, I also have a podcast myself, which is, you can probably just find it on iTunes. It's called Becoming Who You Are. You're probably sensing a theme. So that's the podcast. Right now, the biggest thing there's two things that I'm really working on. The first thing is the Becoming Who You Are Academy, which is a new group that I've launched, which is basically it's an ongoing thing. And each month we look at a particular topic related to authentic living and self-knowledge. We dive really deep into that topic. I create a little workbook for members of the Academy. We have group discussions about it, Q&As, and it's just an opportunity. We were talking about creating the right community earlier. It's an opportunity for people to really meet people who are on that similar path that they are on, and learn together and grow together. So there's that. And then the other thing that I'm working on is a virtual conference with an American company called Entheos, who are you familiar with them?
We are familiar with Entheos.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, cool.
So for those of you who don't know, Entheos is a virtual academy, and it is a school, the school of life, right?
I think they've actually closed the academy now as of the beginning of this year.
Okay, but they have courses or it's personal development stuff, and it's basically a school of life, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like Optimal Living 101, basically, that class that we never got.
The class that should have been taught in school but was never taught about things that actually matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be partnering with them in March, and I've just finished doing the interviews for a virtual conference called The Entrepreneur's Inner World, which is about these psychological and emotional tools that we need to become entrepreneurs, and really answering that question of who do I need to become in order to be an entrepreneur? So not so much what do I need to do, what's the strategy, how do I build a website and all of that stuff, which is important. But I think the more important piece is, okay, who do I need to become? What kind of mindset do I need to develop? Excuse me. It's getting a bit late here and my brain is stopping working now. What kind of mindset do I need to develop? What kind of approach do I need to take? And really focusing on, that internal aspect. So that is going to be available. It's going to be streaming for free for 24 hours for each interview between the 9th and the 13th of March. So I've got, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, 23 or 24 interviews that are going to be going out in March. So I'm super excited about that. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, or if you're even considering entrepreneurship, what I found is that a lot of the stuff that people have talked about in the interviews, a lot of the stuff the experts have talked about has been totally relevant to personal life as well. So there's something in there for everybody.
Great. And that's the beauty of the internet, is that if you live, like I said earlier in the podcast, in maybe a rural area or a secluded area where you're not really finding people that have that similar mindset, the internet is a great place to find like-minded people, because you can connect with anyone, anywhere around the world. And so that support group or that group of people you surround yourself with doesn't necessarily have to be in your physical town.
Absolutely. Yeah, really glad you said that, because that is such an important point.
Yes. So thank you so much, Hannah. We will have all the links to all of your stuff on the website. And guys, thank you so much for listening to Out of the Box podcast. Don't forget to visit our sponsor, hugmeteas.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmeteas.com. Go on there and get your Hug Me Tea. And guys, if you're single, a lot of cute girls will hug you. I have demonstrated this, and I know there's the free hugs movement. I always give the free hugs people hugs, and it's a good way to meet people and spread love and be a positive joy of light. Also, please visit outoftheboxpodcast.com and click on the donate button. We are now accepting Litecoins and Bitcoins and all alternative currency. And as always, we're on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. This has been Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran.